These watercolors have been literally everywhere, and I wanted to know what the hype has been about. Are these as great as people make them seem to be? We will find out in this video. I also have some really exciting news as I am launching my own online art membership. And right now there's a free 7-day trial, so you can confirm that this membership is really for you. It is a mix of pre-recorded and live content, and I explain all of the types of content on my website, so check that out. I have a link in the description for that. And actually this Saturday there will be the first live art session, so I'm really looking forward to seeing all of you in there. The theme of the call will be World in a Bottle, so I can't wait to get creative on that idea. So again, check it out, make use of the free trial going on right now. Click on the link in the description box and sign up right away. So this is the Art Nouveau set from Gansai Tambi. And I've seen this a lot on other channels. I think there was a trend for these maybe a year or 2 years ago, and they were sold out apparently for a long time. Now I was able to get them again. You can see that they come in this green box. They're not cheap here in Europe. I think I paid 45 euros for these. And I think if you were to get them locally, then they are just around 15 euros. So you do pay for either shipping, customs, whatever it is if you import them. But I thought, let's try them. There's a lot of paint in there, so they might be worth the price. I don't know. I really thought that these look very aesthetically pleasing. Obviously, I think everyone who bought them because of that. And I just really wanted to try them because they are kind of an enigma for me. Since they are called, this palette specifically is the Art Nouveau palette, I wanted to try something that's sort of in an Art Nouveau style. And this is a little bit out of my comfort zone because it's very intricate, very detailed. I had already just started the sketch off camera, and here you can see me color it in already. And they are sort of weird to describe. I know a lot of people say that, and I just wanted to try them for myself because I really didn't know what these are like. A lot of people say that these are similar to gouache, that they're more opaque watercolors, that they don't mix well, that they don't blend out as much, but the colors are pretty and vibrant, and basically people like them, but there is a learning curve. And after having tried them here, I can confirm there is a learning curve with these. I have a lot of experience with gouache, and I also have a lot of experience with watercolors. So it's not like I'm a complete beginner, but I have never tried these. So I didn't really know what to expect, but I know how to use watercolors and how to use gouache basically. And in the beginning, you can see I was doing somewhat of a thin layer, kind of just getting to know the material and using them mostly like watercolors. But the style also lends itself really well to gouache with all of these elements that can be colored in flat colors. And the way that these felt really reminds me of gouache. The painting process itself feels very similar to using gouache. But then the result doesn't look like gouache. It dries more streaky than it looks when you're painting it, but that obviously depends on the amount of water you're using versus the amount of paint, and it also depends on the color that you're using. So some colors like this green tone here, I think it's called pea green or May green or something like that, This one is really opaque, and then some of the lighter pink tones are really opaque, and then the darker tones they don't lay down in flat colors like the lighter ones. Honestly, that makes sense to me because the lighter colors are more opaque with gouache as well, and when you add white it looks more flat and less streaky. That's all stuff that I know from gouache. Had I known how similar these are to gouache, I would have never done this style, and I will elaborate on that a little bit later. This one was a roller coaster ride. We're still in the beginning of this painting, and at this point, everything was smooth sailing, everything was fine, I felt good, I had fun, I was patient, I felt really patient when I started this, because otherwise I wouldn't have been able to do something more intricate and also more geometric than what I usually do. So it is a little bit different to my regular stuff. After this one, you will see that I also used them in a sketchbook on a different type of art, so we get a little bit of a feeling what these are like for different types of art. I mean, obviously not every kind of art, but I tried to use them in as many ways as I could think of, just so I can say what these are about and show you all the differences on the types of looks that you can get. And for the flower itself, at the beginning, I had no issues with the colors. I sort of mixed them mostly on the paper itself, blended them together with a wet on wet technique like I would use any other watercolor. And I think they behaved very similar to gouache when you do a wet on wet technique. You can do that with gouache, and the colors just don't bleed into each other as much usually as with the watercolors, but you can get wet on wet techniques with gouache. In the beginnings here where I used a lot of water, it actually looks a lot more like watercolors than gouache because we get all these types of blooming effects that again you can also get with gouache. Gouache can look very similar to watercolors if you add enough water. I would say that these are kind of gouache with a lot of water. If you've ever used just regular water-soluble gouache and you had it on a palette and it dried up and then you add water to it and reuse it, this is how they feel. I would say it's very comparable to that. And the more you let the water sink into the paint, obviously, the more it's gonna activate and the more colors you will get out of it and the flatter you can get your paint, if that makes any sense. And this way you can kind of play around with the sort of vibes and techniques that you're doing. So you can do more of the watercolor effects and you can get the really bold, flat layers that you can do with gouache as well. I would say the fun factor, if you don't run into any issues like I did later on, is really high with these. These are really fun to use. They're very aesthetic. It feels like painting with candy somehow. It's just very fun. It's cutesy, colorful. The palette has really nice colors that go together so well. So if you don't ever want to mix your colors and just want to use the ones that are in your palette, this is pretty fun because you have colors that look really good already. At least in my opinion, I really like the colors in this set. But if you're looking for a watercolor palette that you can create all types of art with, where you can mix the colors a lot, where you can do more, I don't know, intricate art with a lot of the typical watercolor effects, and you're more of a beginner, maybe these aren't the ones for you. I'm not gonna say definitely don't get them. I would never do that. I'm also not gonna say these are only suitable for a certain style. What I will say is that these are not suitable for an Art Nouveau style that I did here. And we're getting closer to seeing why that is, and my main beef that I have with these. If you use them watered down a lot, then it's really fun. I'm definitely gonna use them again at some point once I'm over the initial bitterness that I'm feeling right now. They're not bad. They're just not suitable for any type of mixed media where you want to do line art on top of them. There, I said it. That's the issue that I had here. I'm sure there's people who know a way around this. I did not figure it out in this art piece. It was going really well. I had a lot of fun, and then I wanted it to look more Art Nouveau because the typical Art Nouveau style has these sort of bold, more fine liner outlines, and it really needs those to look like that. I mean, the piece looks nice as it is, but here is where the tragic starts. I wanted it to look Art Nouveau. I wanted to try the line art. I'm using this fine liner. I tried a lot of different ones. This is not the only one that I used. This is the one that stuck to the paint. Like, this is the one that I could easily draw over the paint with. But as soon as I touched it with my hands, I completely smudged it. It didn't matter how long I left it to dry, and I only noticed that here I covered up some of those parts. Here now I'm using a different fine liner. This is a pigment liner from Stettler. This one did not really want to go over top of the paint. I really struggled. It's hard to see here. Sped up, it looks like it was a lot easier than it was, but you can kind of see how finicky that was. I had to go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and then put my pen onto a different scrap piece of paper in between because it just wouldn't work anymore. So here I covered all of that up, and I used the softest colored pencils that I own, which in my experience works the best on gouache. If I want to do line art on top of gouache, I would use a Prismacolor colored pencil because they're the softest and you can layer them on top of gouache more easily. I still had issues. So here you can see the finished one. I had to speed that up because I kind of had some anger issues in between the process. By the way, here's the cat picture of the day, just to get you into a more positive mood again. I am pretty happy with how the art piece turned out in the end, but it was a struggle to do the line art. For the next one, I decided no line art, not with any other materials. Line art exclusively with the watercolors themselves. Here I'm using a light gray toned watercolor sketchbook, and I wanted to see how well can I blend these and do gradients, because if they behave similar to gouache, can I use them like gouache? Can I get them to work and look like gouache? The answer is yes and no. They work like gouache to a certain degree, but not fully. You can see here it looks rather flat when it is still wet. Then it dries and then it gets streaky. Because obviously I have a lot of water in my mix because they are watercolors. They look streaky, so I did a second layer here. Basically, they're like gouache that needs a second layer if you want it to look flat. They do blend really nicely here if you have the patience to go over it again, which is the fact with a lot of gouache brands. So that's not something that's a deal breaker. You just need to take your time with that. I also wanted to see what other types of effects I could get, so I was really playing around with these, doing more flat colors for those bubbles, doing gradients on the fish, doing all types of wet on wet techniques and effects. And I find that they really just sit there. They don't run into each other as much because the paint is much thicker than more transparent watercolors. So they do behave, like I said 1,000 times, similar to gouache. I'm not completely sold on them yet, if you can't tell from my narrative so far, because I just don't understand the point of them at this point. Because if I want to get a gouache look, I'm just gonna use gouache because it's easier to use. And if I want to get all of the watercolor perks, then I'm just gonna use more transparent watercolors. These are sort of an in-between hybrid that my mind just hasn't really understood yet. And I really want to like these because I paid them, got them with my own money. I want to like them. I want to use them. I love the colors. They're so exciting to use. So I want to use them more. But there is definitely a learning curve with them. I'm not gonna lie, if you're a complete beginner, you've never tried watercolors or gouache yet, or you struggle with painting just as it is, maybe these are not ideal for you. If you want something to play around with, if you're stuck in a rut and you hate the fact that you know everything about your art materials and it feels dull and boring to you, these could be great because they could get you out of that, because you have to think about how to use the material again, and it might give you a different approach. So for that, they could work really well. This is also how I'm going to use them in the future. I might try some more abstract art or more loose art with them, because as you can see, I did more of the defined art with line art and just wanted to look a little bit more clean. So that could have been an issue here. This could be the case why I had some issues that I ran into, because maybe they don't work as well for that. So I will try them maybe with a landscape that's a little bit more loose and has more of the brush effects and less of the line art. So definitely gonna use them again. Yeah, this is my thoughts on them basically. I've seen a lot of videos about them, and a lot of people have shared similar thoughts on them. I know a lot of people swear that these are the best paints they've ever touched. A lot of people say that they're hard to use, but once you figure out how to, they're fun. I do believe that, because that is definitely the case with gouache. I know a lot of beginners have a lot of issues with gouache in the beginning, and after a while they start to love it when they know how the paint behaves. So I'm definitely gonna give this more of a try, and I we'll also see what you guys think. If you like them, let me know if you want me to use them more, if you want to see more videos with them. I might just incorporate them in videos that are not specific to them, like sketchbook ideas videos that you can recreate with other types of materials if you don't own these. Or I might do a follow-up on this video if you are interested in that. Maybe in a few months, my thoughts then, because they might completely change. I have done a 180 on a lot of art supplies that I initially hated or loved, and then it completely changed after a while. So there's definitely room for me to change my opinion here. So let me know if that's interesting to you, that I would do a follow-up. And also I would love to have you on board with the Cozy Creatives Collective. Don't forget to sign up for that, because the first theme that we're going to do is going to be World in a Bottle. So if you really like painting fish, this could be an idea. I'm gonna paint a very simple landscape with a tree just with some lines, hills, and sky, stuff like that in the session. But you could create anything based on that theme, put your own interpretation on the topic. And I'm so excited to see what everybody is going to create. And there's also already a pre-recorded real-time class in the membership. So if you want to learn how to recreate this piece, that's also in there, and you can access all of that on the free trial and just see if that's a good space for you and if you enjoy being in there. You can see on this piece here, I did line art with the paints themselves. I used my tiniest brush. This is one that's actually meant for nail art, and it's been working really well for me. Now, after using it for a few months, the bristles are starting to kind of get the brush gets a little bit thicker and more used, so it's getting harder to get precise lines. I'm definitely noticing a change here. Obviously, a very cheap nail art brush is not gonna last forever, but it's been good. Like, I've really enjoyed using that one so far, and it wasn't really expensive. I will try to leave links for every product that I used in the description box. Sometimes they're not available everywhere, but just search for nail art brushes. I think there's similar ones everywhere. There's very thin brushes for nail art, obviously, because you need very thin ones. The downside is that you have to dip it into the paint a lot, which is a big downside for me because I'm editing all of those dips out so that the footage doesn't look really jarring to watch. And I don't know if it's also a big downside for people who don't film their process. Maybe it's a little bit inconvenient, but you can get really fine lines with them. And with these paints, it really depended on the color that I was using. With some, I could get thinner lines, and with some, just a little bit thicker ones. To my surprise, it was kind of hard to get thin and precise lines with this very dark blue, gray, almost black color that I'm using here. Usually with gouache, it's a lot easier to get thin lines with the darker colors. Maybe I just used too much paint and should have used more water. That's definitely a possibility. But I just played around with these here, so I will definitely, hopefully, be improving with my practice when it comes to these. So here is this page spread finished, and I have to say that I really like the colors on this one, and they go together really nicely even though it's very colorful. Again, don't forget to sign up for my new online art membership, the Cozy Creatives Collective. Sign up for the free 7-day trial and join us on the first live art session on Saturday, June 8th. I'm really looking forward to seeing you there.